I see it as a huge, like, just avalanche of opportunity coming at us. We're going to see a lot more of agent-based AI, or agentic AI, as some people call it. It's a perfect area for an organizational psychologist to jump into because it will change jobs. I don't know that it eliminates jobs, but it certainly changes jobs, which means we need our AI literacy to come up.
Welcome everyone to the AI Governance Podcast, where we discuss practical approaches for responsible AI practitioners. My name is Shankar, and today we'll be covering one of the most interesting and sometimes challenging elements of AI governance, which is AI procurement. So we're honored to have on our podcast today Dr. Cari Miller, who is the founder of the Center for Inclusive Change, the vice chair of the IEEE standard on AI procurement, and a leading global expert on AI procurement and the future of work. So welcome, Cari, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a great topic.
Great. Well, I've provided a super brief introduction, but I'm hoping that we can start with just a bit more color on how you came to this work and which issues here you find the most interesting.
Yeah, thank you. So I started as a corporate strategist many moons ago, at the beginning of the dawn of the digital age, I like to say. And through that journey, of course, I was working with marketing and advertising firms. And so I found Google and Facebook, and they were kind of forward with all of the AI activity, at least in my world. And I started to see pretty early on that they were using the same algorithms for selling, sneakers and T-shirts as they were for placing employment ads and housing, and that seemed wrong. And so as my career in education progressed, when I got into my doctorate program especially, I doubled down on the governance side of AI and, complying with laws and all of that stuff. And so through that journey, I focused on work tech and ed tech, but I kept realizing, wait a minute, it's procurement that decides whether this stuff comes through or not. So that's when I got into the procurement side of the research, which has been really informative and fascinating.
That's a great point. There's such a deep link between work tech, ed tech, and procurement that kind of flows through your background and also flows through kind of the topics that we're going to discuss here today. So on AI procurement, there's so many different ways that AI enters into organizations. So you can have it procured through the formal procurement process. You can have it dropped into a non-AI software that you put through your procurement process after the fact. Or you could access it in a browser as a cloud service, including, whether that use is permissible or without an organization's permission. So do you have any kind of initial thoughts on how AI practitioners can think about ensuring a level playing field for responsible AI among all the different ways that AI can enter an organization?
I do. Actually, some of this I wouldn't call procurement, because procurement is, it's a little more pure in its intent. It's decisive. It's like, that's what we want. We have a business need. We're going to go get that. Here are parameters. We can control how it gets, deployed in-house, and people can be trained and all of that stuff. The other cases, there's two ways I like to refer to them. One is shadow IT, which has been around for a long time. This is not new information. And the other, I have recently come to refer to it as the Trojan horse effect, where you've purchased something and now all of a sudden the vendor's like, guess what? We put AI in it. Isn't that cool? You're like, wait, what? I didn't say that was okay. What are you doing? So that's more of a Trojan horse kind of challenge for us. To effectively deal with shadow IT and Trojan horses, I think you really have to have your game together. Part of it is just general literacy for your employees, to make sure, people adopt stuff because it sounds like it'll help. But if you don't understand how to kind of balance the risk, then the helpful part will bite you later. With the Trojan horse effect, that is just a matter of knowing what is authorized to be in the house and then making sure you've made it clear to those vendors, don't turn anything on unless you've talked to us. You either do that proactively, if it's a big enough operational component, you go back to them and say, I need to renegotiate this contract right now. Or when it comes up for rebid, you'd renegotiate at that point. But those are a couple of ways to deal with it.
I love the term Trojan horse effect for that for that phenomenon. I think with the Trojan horse effect, if it's kind of obviously AI, right? So if it's let's say PowerPoint or Word or something like that, and then later you have generative AI features being turned on, then it's quite obvious. But as as you get into kind of those gray areas within definitions of AI, it could also just be that some legal definition kind of retroactively classifies something that you procured as AI, and that that wouldn't necessarily be kind of an intentional Trojan horse. So there's definitely kind of enough. It's a very complex space, and I agree that kind of the best approach to it is making sure that everyone is aware of the issues. Have you found in your experience that the best way to do that is through just kind of identifying people and having kind of standing conversations with all of the people involved in these different types of ways that AI enters an organization? Or is it kind of having crisp communications with those different groups? What has been most effective in your experience?
I mean, generally what we would see is the organization takes the time or the moment to do an audit, first of all, and try to understand what's in-house. What are we doing, guys? And kind of with amnesty, like, all right, secretly tell me what I shouldn't be knowing, and so we can all be safe, right? From there, you make a policy, and then it's policy education. It's like, here's the policy, but more importantly, it's not just this is the policy, it's why the policy exists, because understanding why just helps people think about, I think that company just turned something on and man, that feels like if I type in my trade secret here, they're going to have access to that and I should probably tell someone. It's that simple, really. It's just general awareness. You don't have to be an expert coder. You just have to know why you're looking at stuff.
Great. And I know that you've authored the risk management framework for the procurement of AI systems, which is a very thorough, kind of comprehensive, field-leading document on AI procurement. I'm hoping you can give us a high-level overview of the document and some of the key concepts inside of it.
Yeah. So first of all, I took, we've got a lot of risk management frameworks out there, and I just wanted to put another one out. I'm just kidding. I felt like the ones that are out there, there are patterns to them, but they weren't specific to procurement. And so I'm like, we've got to dial this down straight into procurement. And why is this applicable here? So I took COSO and ISO 27001 and found all the common elements and then started applying that to procurement. So you start with a legitimate business case, please. Let's not be distracted by shiny baubles. And once you've done your root cause analysis, which is really important because you may or may not need AI, quite frankly, AI is not going to fix broken processes. You got to do that legwork on your own. But if you do, you need AI. Okay, good. First thing you do is in this model is you establish a risk appetite. What we find is that every use case that you're procuring is just a little bit different, and some of them are high risk and some of them aren't, and that determines how rigorous you need to be when you set up your guardrails. So if you can do your risk appetite, which the paper guides you through how to do that, then that helps you create what I like to say, don't tie your shoelaces together solicitation requirements. So you're going to do risk aware solicitation requirements. So when you ask the vendors to respond, you're going to say stuff in that requirement like, by the way, I'm not going to let you use my data to develop your commercial product later. So those are just, you put those into your solicitation requirements. So everyone understands. Those who can't conform to that should not answer the call. So that's part A. Once you get into evaluating, this is the next step in the framework, is you evaluate, right? You've got all the responses back. These are my vendors. Here's their solutions. Now we're going to look to see, did they apply that NIST RMF, AI RMF? Are they conforming to the EU AI Act, kind of the general principles of that? Hopefully they are. However, this is the next part, the contract negotiation. No one's perfect. And so to the extent that you find someone has a gap here or there, that doesn't mean you just wipe them off the slate and they can't participate with you. It just means you need to work with them to say, I noticed you didn't have an ethics training for your developers. Would you mind putting that in place in the next quarter? They might say no. You might say, that's really important to me. And you negotiate that. So, and you put that in the contract. So you're dealing with risk mitigation in the contract. And then monitoring is the last part of any risk management framework, anywhere you look at one. In this case, monitoring AI is like watching toddlers run around. You have to know where they're at. You have to know, did they eat bad data? You don't let them follow someone into the bathroom. You give them a timeout if they're being mean to people. So we watch the AI, right? And so that basically, those are the 5 or 6 components of the framework that are relevant to procurement.
Yeah, I think that point about negotiating and speaking to vendors, using the framework to kind of negotiate with vendors, it really resonates with me. What we hear quite often from AI practitioners is there's only a few AI vendors that do exactly what we require for this use case, and they're not none of them meets our rigorous requirements for responsible AI. And I think great advice there is pick up the phone and talk to them, ask them to add some of the elements and features, and then document it. So I definitely agree with that. And the risk management framework for procurement of AI systems is a very comprehensive framework. I would encourage everyone listening to take a look at it. And I want to kind of switch gears in the conversation a bit to future of work, which is closely related to procurement issues. So Cari, last year we saw studies that showed massive productivity gains from AI use, but a lot of recent commentary has contradicted this view, saying the jury's still out on how productivity gains from AI play out. They have been limited in many organizations. So do you fall on either side of that debate, and how can we kind of reconcile these two different views?
I don't know if I'm a chief reconciler on this one. I find this fascinating because I did so much work in corporate strategy, which involved, process engineering and org psych and all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, I look at a question like this and I think, gosh, don't we have short memories? Because when, in the early 2000s, we're implementing ERP systems and we're doing all of these things. And oh my gosh, it's going to save us 50% of our time. And lo and behold, you might have got one body that you didn't have to rehire when they quit, but you added 4 people in IT. It's like, what about this did we not understand? So to me, a lot of times I see people chase broken processes because they're painful, right? And it's like, well, this can auto-magically fix that. Not unless you do some really hard work on that broken process first. And that's the part people skip over sometimes, that change management aspect of life. It's really missing. And so I'm not surprised to hear we're not gaining all of our, so I'm not surprised to hear that we're not gaining all the, the benefits. The other part about AI that's interesting too is if you don't address, the burdens of the risks coexist with the opportunities that are in there. So if you don't arrest the risks, you're going to erode your ability to gain the opportunities. And skipping over that because of lack of literacy or the vendor just, put their foot down and said you can't. That's also why we're not seeing all the benefits we could be seeing.
All great points. So I think it's the generative AI is just one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
There's kind of doing your homework in terms of organizational culture, change management, communications, and it's getting all of those things right in an elegant way that can kind of help you incrementally unlock those additional gains from generative AI.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you expect how do you expect agent-based AI to impact jobs and job duties in the future?
Okay, so I don't know if everybody in the audience is familiar with what agent-based AI is. So let's describe that real quick, because that is like taking AI systems and like stringing them together to get a whole process done, right? So now instead of this one system that I wonder if there's risks inside of there I need to mitigate so I can gain the benefits. Now you've got 4 or 5 of them together. So it's going to make things a lot more complicated. So with that said, I see it as a huge, like just avalanche of opportunity coming at us. We're going to see a lot more of agent-based AI or agentic AI, as some people call it. It's a perfect area for an organizational psychologist to jump into because it will change jobs. I don't know that it eliminates jobs, but it certainly changes jobs, which means we need our AI literacy to come up. Quick. Let's not delay anymore. Let's start with the literacy basics, and then we got to build into domain specific literacy. So you've got a command of the AI in your career field, and then make sure that organizationally we continue. We encourage the continuance of AI learning. Has to go that way, because here's what I see. Let me give one storyline example of how I see like an agent-based AI working. I was talking to this company. They are a procurement team, and they work with merger and acquisition investors. And so these investors will buy a company, they wipe out the core common resources, and they pack them all together. So this is the procurement team. So you buy the company, you get rid of that procurement team. Now you're coordinated here with this big procurement team. One of the things in a merger and acquisition that you always watch out for is how the people are impacted that remain in the acquired organization. One of the things that those people tend to do is drink coffee. I know this sounds really simple, but if you're bought and all of a sudden your coffee service is disrupted, not only do you hate the company you are now working for, but now you have like anger issues, right? So how does agentic AI come into play with that? Well, in this procurement conglomerate, what they can do is they can say, oh, acquisition, gotcha. Let me go check on how much coffee you make. We have a coffee contract. I'm going to plug that coffee amount into my coffee contract. I'm going to make sure that they understand this is where all the new coffee gets shipped, so that there is no disruption in coffee service, because you just don't want that, right? So an agent-based AI can do all of that looking for you and make all of that happen. Where before it was a person like, okay, let me look at your records. And it's the low-level stuff that, maybe you didn't need high education to do it. It's just work, That's great for agent-based AI. But how did the job change? That person who was normally doing that now has to understand, hey, when I write that coffee contract, I need to have a clause in there that's an escalator clause that says, when I add new volume, these are my price point triggers. I want a reduction in cost here. I want this to automatically happen. I'm going to verify ship locations in the future. So they were doing things to negotiate with that coffee vendor before. Now they need to know, how does that agent or string of agents work? And how does that translate back into their new negotiating practices? So that's how jobs change with agentic AI. They didn't get rid of that person. They just made them more valuable.
Great. Yeah. So I think, that bolsters a couple of key themes that we've been hearing about AI and the future of work. that technology automates tasks, not jobs, and that context-specific knowledge actually becomes more important, because the organizations and people that have that knowledge are kind of best positioned to deal with and to implement these AI systems, and particularly these agent-based AI systems.
Yeah.
And you've also reminded me that I need another cup of coffee. So
Essential.
so we are running up on time here. I'm wondering if you can share one key takeaway for practitioners of AI governance.
Yeah, absolutely. My favorite one is so simple. It's just that governance does not equal brain surgery. It really doesn't. People hear it and they're like, oh gosh, AI, I don't know. I don't know anything about it. But really, if you just slow down, honestly, if you just slow down, you take a look at the tech, you ask some stakeholders, hey, you want to look at this with me? What do you think? They'll tell you what they think. You have to listen to them. That's change management, right? And then from there, you write down necessary guardrails. My example is call centers, right? They might tell you, I don't really like how this tech is watching me all day. It feels like a micromanager. Can we just not have it all day on me? Okay, what's the logical guardrail for that? Maybe we only do it when you're training in for the first 2 weeks. Maybe we only turn it on once a month to amp up skills or something. We just listen. It's really just listening, slowing down and listening.
That's a fantastic note to end on. So Cari, thanks so much for joining us for this insightful conversation on AI procurement, which is such a key component of AI governance. And with that, we'll wrap up this episode of the podcast. Thanks everyone for listening, and we will see you next time. Thanks, Cari.
Thank you.